While I was in prison, the home I raised the kids in, Jamie Charles and Tammy Sue, it burned to the ground while I was in prison. I watched it burn down from the...
This man who built a religious empire bigger than most corporations, who slept in a prison cell with one of America's most paranoid political extremists, who watched his wife leave him for the same contractor who built his dream, and who still today, at 86 years old, begs strangers on television for money to keep him off the streets. Jim Bakker never stopped, and the real story is worse than anyone reported. The Beggar King at 86.
In May of 2025, Jim Bakker appeared on what is now called the Jim Bakker Family Show and said something that should have shocked everyone watching. But it did not, because the people watching Jim Bakker in 2025 are the same kind of people who watched him in 1985. They believe in him, and that belief has cost every generation of his followers more than they will ever fully understand. He looked into the camera, visibly weakened after 7 strokes that had hit him over the previous 5 years, and told his audience the ministry had about 1 month of operating expenses left. He said donations had dropped because people were living through perilous times. He mentioned that he lives off his Social Security check. Then he said it. If they foreclose on this ministry, they will take my house too. So I will be on the street. He was asking for $1,000 donations. He needed $1 million or everything was finished. This was not the first time he made this exact plea. In 2020, he begged for emergency funds to keep the ministry from going bankrupt during the pandemic. And before that, in the late 1980s, he cried on camera while asking elderly viewers on fixed incomes to send their retirement savings to support what he called God's work, all while spending $9,000 on Belgian truffles for a Christmas party and installing gold-plated fixtures in his personal bathroom. The truly unsettling part is not that he keeps asking. The truly unsettling part is that it keeps working. His ministry operates under Morningside Church in Blue Eye, Missouri, a nearly 600-acre compound deep in the Ozarks. Because it is classified as a church, there are no public financial disclosures or Form 990 filings, leaving no way to verify whether the foreclosure threat is real or whether it is the same emotional manipulation Bakker has used for 60 years. And just a few months after that plea, in February of 2026, TMZ contacted his son Jay, asking to confirm that Bakker had died from a stroke. Jay called the rumors disturbing and clarified that his father was very much alive. The fact that a major tabloid outlet was already writing the obituary tells you everything about where Jim Bakker stands in 2026. He is a man the world has already moved past, and yet he refuses to stop performing. And the performance started much earlier than most people realize. The boy who learned what really works. Most people know Jim Bakker as a televangelist who got caught. What most people do not know is that before the scandals, before the empire, before the fraud conviction, Bakker was a shy kid from Muskegon, Michigan, who carried a secret so heavy that he buried it for decades. In his own autobiography, I Was Wrong, published in 1997, Bakker admitted he was very confused about his sexuality from a young age. He attributed that confusion to being molested as a child. That admission sat in a 647-page book that most people treated as a redemption tour, and almost nobody pulled out the single detail that actually explained the pattern of his entire life. A boy who learned early that shame could be hidden, that silence was survival, and that the people closest to you could be the most dangerous. He met Tammy Faye LaValle
At North Central University in Minneapolis in 1960, a Bible college affiliated with the Assemblies of God. They married in '61, dropped out together, and spent years as traveling evangelists performing puppet shows at small churches for whatever donations people would drop in the offering plate. That broke. Desperate period taught Bakker the most important lesson of his career. People do not give money because a sermon is theologically sound. People give money because they feel something, because a performer on stage makes them cry or laugh, or believe that their $20 bill is doing something eternal. Jim Bakker understood emotional mechanics the way an engineer understands load-bearing walls, and he used that knowledge for the rest of his life. By 1966, he was working at Pat Robertson's Christian Broadcasting Network, helping build what would become the 700 Club. But Bakker was too ambitious and too hungry for the spotlight. He left Robertson. Then he joined Paul Crouch at Trinity Broadcasting and left him too, under rumors of financial disagreements that neither side fully explained. Absorb what was useful. Build the personal brand. Leave before anyone could demand accountability. By 1974, Jim and Tammy Faye had launched the PTL Club from a converted furniture store in Charlotte, North Carolina. Within 3 years, it was reaching 13 million viewers. The quiet boy from Michigan had become one of the most watched men in American religion, and he was about to take every dollar those viewers had. The Christian Disneyland that was built on a lie. When Heritage USA opened in Fort Mill, South Carolina in 1978, it was unlike anything the Christian world had ever seen. 2,300 acres, a 501-room luxury hotel, a water park, a skating rink, a go-kart track, an amphitheater staging elaborate productions of the crucifixion, a full Main Street replica lined with shops, a campground with 400 units, a castle, even a television production studio built directly into the complex. At its peak, Heritage USA attracted nearly 6 million visitors per year and employed 2,500 people. It was the third most visited theme park in the United States, behind only Walt Disney World and Disneyland. Ronald Reagan personally praised PTL at a national broadcasters convention, and Bakker beamed that presidential endorsement to every viewer in his audience. In January of 1984, Bakker went on air and offered viewers something irresistible. For a $1,000 donation, they would become lifetime partners, entitled to a 3-night hotel stay every year, forever. He promised the offer would be limited to 25,000 partnerships, and then he never stopped selling. According to the United States Postal Inspection Service, he raised over $158 million by massively overselling those partnerships, collecting money from tens of thousands more donors than the single hotel could ever accommodate. He knew the math did not work. He kept going. The excess money vanished into PTL's bloated operating budget and into the Bakker's personal accounts. Between 1983 and '86, Jim and Tammy Faye amassed Rolls-Royces, Mercedes-Benzes, Cadillacs, a Corvette, a houseboat, a Florida condominium, and mink coats. Former aide David Taggart, nobody on the outside questioned any of it because the numbers looked incredible. 6 million visitors, a satellite network that carried the show into millions of living rooms 5 days a week. From the outside, Heritage USA looked like the most successful Christian enterprise in American history. From the inside, it was a ticking bomb funded by promises that could never be kept, managed by people who were more afraid of each other than they were of God. And Jim Bakker's secrets were darker than misused donations. The room nobody was supposed to know about. On the 6th of December 1980, Jessica Hahn was a 21-year-old church secretary from Massapequa, New York. She had grown up isolated and lonely, had found community through religion, and idolized Jim Bakker the way millions of PTL viewers did. When John Wesley Fletcher, a traveling evangelist and PTL co-host, invited her to fly to Florida to meet Bakker, she thought it was the opportunity of a lifetime. What happened in that Sheraton hotel room in Clearwater, Florida, lasted about 15 minutes and shaped the rest of her life. According to Hahn, Fletcher provided champagne that she believed contained a sedative. Bakker, who was 40 at the time, forced himself on her. In her own words, he did everything a man could do to a woman. After Bakker left, Fletcher returned and mistreated her as well. Hahn later described crawling back to the bed with blood from her back staining the sheets. Bakker called her 3 days later and offered something that fell far short of an apology. She recalled him saying words to the effect of, "When you help the shepherd, you help the sheep," and telling her to think of the millions of people she had helped. The world would not learn about Jessica Hahn until March of 1987, when Charlotte Observer reporting made the cover-up impossible to contain. And when the curtain finally fell, the secrets behind it were even worse than a single hotel room misconduct. The secrets, the takeover, and the cage. Fletcher went public in late 1988 with an account that destroyed whatever moral credibility Bakker had left. In a Penthouse magazine interview, Fletcher described himself as Jim Bakker's male prostitute and said he had procured young men for the televangelist using charity funds. He testified to a federal grand jury about his own sexual relationship with Bakker and about Bakker's relationship with his personal aide David Taggart. A former PTL employee told the same grand jury he had walked in on Bakker and Taggart in a sexual encounter in the Heritage Grand Hotel's presidential suite. Bakker's own former security chief, Don Hardister, told the IRS that at least 4 male PTL employees had confided in him about warding off Bakker's sexual advances. Under oath, Bakker denied all of it. But in his autobiography, he acknowledged being very confused about his sexuality throughout his life. Historian Vincent Sinan of Regent University observed that there does appear to have been a kind of subterranean homosexual world inside PTL that has never been fully described. That hidden world was the glue holding the entire empire together. David and James Taggart, Bakker's personal aide and interior designer, were convicted of tax evasion for embezzling $1.1 million in PTL funds. Prosecutors believed Bakker tolerated their theft because Taggart knew about his private life. Silence was currency. Exposure meant destruction for everyone. When the Hahn story broke in March of '87, Bakker panicked and turned to Jerry Falwell, who agreed to serve as a caretaker for PTL while Bakker handled the scandal. Instead, Falwell purged every Bakker loyalist from the organization, replaced the board with his own allies, and locked Bakker out permanently. Bakker appeared on Nightline with Ted Koppel and accused Falwell of stealing PTL under false pretenses. Falwell fired back, calling Bakker a thief, a liar, a homosexual, and a sick man whose sins have made him deranged. The fraud trial began in August of 1989. David Taggart took the stand and laid out a world of $500,000 bonuses, luxury car purchases, and ministry funds spent on personal extravagance while staff were being fired. On the 24th of October, Bakker was convicted on all 24 counts. Judge Maximum Bob Potter sentenced him to 45 years and a $500,000 fine. The sentence was later reduced to 8 years. He served nearly 5. His cellmate was Lyndon LaRouche, the convicted conspiracy theorist. Bakker later wrote that to say that Lyndon was slightly paranoid would be like saying the Titanic had a bit of a leak. He also admitted he had never read the Bible all the way through before prison, and that, by the end of his sentence, he was reading it 16 hours a day. Think about what that does to a person. A man who once commanded a $129 million empire, who had lunch invitations from the President of the United States, who had 13 million viewers hanging on his every word, was now sharing a 10 by 15-foot cell with a conspiracy theorist and earning 12 cents an hour as a prison orderly. While Bakker sat in that cell, Tammy Faye filed for divorce in '92. She wrote, "For years I have been pretending that everything is all right, when in fact I hurt all the time." She married Roe Messner within a year, the same man who built Heritage USA, who processed the Jessica Hahn hush payment, and who was later convicted of bankruptcy fraud himself. The salesman who cannot stop selling. Most careers would end after a fraud conviction, a prison sentence, and public humiliation on that scale. Jim Bakker treated it as a gap on his resume. In 1998, he married Lori Beth Graham, who had lived through her own history of addiction, domestic abuse, and 5 abortions before age 22. Together, they adopted 5 children and launched The Jim Bakker Show in 2003 from the Ozarks compound. Gone was the prosperity gospel. In its place was apocalyptic dread. 5 days a week, Bakker warned his audience, taste, tested his 50-day survival food bucket, and described it as nearly inedible. Vice journalists who tried to live off the food reported the same thing. The buckets claimed 30-year shelf lives, which critics noted seemed to undermine Bakker's claim that the rapture was imminent. If the world is ending next year, why buy food that lasts until 2049? The audience for this version of Jim Bakker is overwhelmingly elderly. These are people who genuinely fear what is coming. Then the pandemic hit, and Bakker did what he has always done. He found the fear. In February of 2020, he promoted a product called Silver Solution on air as a potential coronavirus cure across 11 episodes. The Missouri Attorney General sued. The FDA and FTC issued cease and desist letters. New York's Attorney General sent a warning. In June of 21, Bakker settled for $156,000 without admitting wrongdoing. His attorney, former Missouri Governor Jay Nixon, said Bakker was being unfairly targeted by those who want to crush his ministry. Tammy Faye died of colon cancer on the 20th of July 2007 after an 11-year battle. She was 65. Despite everything, she was remembered for compassion that her ex-husband never showed. In 1985, when most evangelical leaders would not even say the word AIDS, she sat down and interviewed a gay pastor living with HIV on her show. That moment meant more to the community it reached. Jessica Hahn retreated into near total obscurity. She was 66 years old in 2026, still carrying the weight of a story the world consumed as entertainment. Jim Bakker's son Jay became a pastor who rejected his parents' theology entirely and publicly criticized the religious right. The unfinished Heritage Tower, the 21-story skeleton of the Hotel Bakker, oversold and never completed, still stands in Fort Mill, South Carolina, with rusted railings and broken windows. And in the Ozarks, Jim Bakker asks for money. He has been doing it for 60 years. He has been caught. He has been convicted. He has served time, and he has not stopped. Because Jim Bakker does not believe in the prosperity gospel. He does not believe in doomsday prophecy. He does not believe in silver cures or survival food buckets or the end of the world. Jim Bakker believes in the camera. He believes in the emotional reaction of a frightened viewer reaching for their wallet. He believes in the one mechanism that has worked every single time, through every scandal, through every prison sentence, through every betrayal. Make them feel something, then ask them to pay for it. That is not a ministry. That is a business model. And after 86 years, the store is still open. Jim Bakker has survived prison, 7 strokes, and 2 collapsed empires. And he is still asking for money from the same type of audience he defrauded decades ago. What do you think drives people to keep giving to someone who has already been caught taking everything?